It's no strange occurrence that many black people are now self-loathing, perceives ourselves as being our own worst enemies, and reveres Caucasians in spite of such a brutally horrific history of the contrary. This noted mindset that clearly benefits the white society is far too widespread among black people to be some strange occurrence. It's not. It's by deliberate design. It's always by deliberate design whenever the oppressed population starts thinking exactly as the oppressors wants them to think. The negative perceptions of our racial group and favorable perceptions of Caucasians, often held by many black people, were actually deliberately embedded into our collective minds by white propagandists. The white oppressors' greatest power over us is that they write all of the narratives that we receive, and they've conditioned us, millions of us, to blindly accept those narratives without questioning them. This allows them to favorably shape our perception of themselves and negatively shape our perceptions of ourselves through the information they feed us. They do so by constantly inundating us with fraudulent, positive, white exalting narratives about themselves, while simultaneously subjecting us to receiving only the fraudulent, worst narratives about ourselves. For us, it's literally like being forced to attend a daily pep rally for an opposing team, and all of the information being presented at that pep rally are lies falsely exalting the opposing team and marginalizing our team. With time, many of us then internalize those lies, thus negatively shaping our perceptions of ourselves. This demoralizes us, divides us, creates black self-loathing, and shifts black collective aggressions away from the white oppressive society and redirects it towards and against ourselves. It also attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people. This is all possible because regardless of how intelligent people are, if it's possible to control the input of information and media images that people receives, it's entirely possible to control what they'll believe, what they'll think, and even how they'll behave. The collective minds of large targeted populations are quite easily manipulated when people are unaware of what's actually being done to them. This presented explanation is how many black people became self-loathing while revering Caucasians in spite of such a brutally horrific history of the contrary. And as long as they keep us within this collective condition, they can then rule over us forever. Those of us who do not critically think never notices our mental change. Turning a group against themselves by manipulating them to believe the fraudulent, worst narratives about themselves is actually a common practice within the U.S. military doctrine of psychological warfare. It is a demoralized, divide and rule tactic. The teaching goes as such: to defeat, subdue, and or to control a large targeted population without having to physically fight them. You can do so by constantly inundating them with fraudulent, negative, demoralizing information about themselves, which leads them to believe that their core problem lies within themselves. When the targeted population has been misled to believe that their core problem lies within themselves, this profoundly demoralizes them, divides them, and shifts their collective frustrations and aggressions away from their enemies and redirects it against themselves. This is precisely what the white society has done to its black population. Here's a simplified example of how this actually works. Let's say, for example, imagine that a crew of people were aboard their own ship, a massive ship, and their ship was being followed by a second ship. A second ship constantly broadcasting derogatory negative messages to the first crew. Such messages as that the first cruise ship was lesser, smaller, not seaworthy, perhaps slowly sinking, or that the crew was incompetent, or that a mutiny was being planned. With time, the crew constantly receiving those negative messages about themselves, being unable to refute or confirm those derogatory messages and deficiencies, will eventually grow weary and paranoid by the negative messages, and they will eventually come to accept those negative narratives about themselves. This will negatively affect their perception of themselves. The taunting narratives cause them to start resenting each other, subsequently cause them to distrust each other, hate each other, start doubting their capabilities, and start fighting among themselves, all based upon the negative information. Many amongst the targeted crew may become so self-loathing that they'll try to disassociate themselves from their crew members. And some will even jump into the sea and swim towards the taunting ship. Those of us who remain on the ship will look at those swimming towards the other ship and call them sellouts and traitors. But the truth is, they merely possess weaker mental fortitudes, and their mind collapse under the constant demoralization. The basis of this concept of mind manipulation works by affecting the unconscious mind through demoralizing deception. Its weapon is the message that it carries and the way that it negatively impacts the targeted population in terms of their behavior. Within a real-life setting, this demoralizing, divide, and rule psychological warfare system is precisely what white oppressive forces deploys against the black population. Presently, the news media outlets are falsely scripted with black racially demoralizing propaganda that are deliberately designed to demoralize us, divide us, create black self-loathing, and shift black collective aggressions away from the white oppressive society and redirects it towards and against ourselves. It also implies that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. It also conditions black people to be more compliant with white dominance over our lives, and is so effective in many cases it makes us prefer white dominance over our lives. Black people, we can no longer ignore the obvious indication that white oppressive forces are deploying a black racially demoralizing propaganda campaign against us. The constant and unrelenting denigration of our image is too prevalent to be merely the work of a few racist people. It's being instituted at a national government level. This is the same psychological warfare technology that the government has deployed against foreign adversaries. It was secretly decided to start deploying it against African Americans in response to the unprecedented unified black protests of the 1960s. Sadly, to our own detriment, the oppressed will always believe the fraudulent worst about themselves. That's a quote from Franz Fanon. Black people, it's time to wake up. Now, those of us who are ignorant are insisting that our collective condition is the result of the Willie Lynch slave syndrome. Now, usually people have the right to believe whatever they choose to believe. However, there's a profound exception to that rule when it comes to the oppressed. The oppressed must gain a clear, concise, and accurate understanding of our plight and condition in order to liberate ourselves. Because if our understandings are flawed, then all of our liberating remedies, strategies, and solutions that stem from those flawed understandings will also be flawed. This is why those of us who know the truth must teach. Therefore, I will not be silent to appease ignorance when it's ignorance that hinders our liberation. Our plight and condition has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome myth. To believe that silly myth, a person would have to be ignorant of how true brainwashing is achieved. That silly, feeble-minded premise present what would in fact be the least effective method used for controlling generations of millions of people. It's simply not how true brainwashing is achieved. Not at all. True brainwashing requires a system that's being constantly reapplied and reinforced upon a targeted population in order to be effective. If not, its effectiveness would lessen with each new generation, not worsening or continuing as we're witnessing with our people. Our condition is a result of the white society's psychological warfare propaganda campaign that they are deploying against us. And we must recognize this, so therefore our remedies against it will be proper. The truth is that the white media's unrelenting negative depictions of the black population that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually a black racially demoralizing divide and rule psychological warfare propaganda campaign. To moralize, divide, and rule is a method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division between them. This system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects the black population to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. It is a well-proven tactic because whenever the oppressed are made demoralized, divided, and self-loathing, they are much more easier to control. This is what's being done to us. Those of us who are telling you the truth are trying to free you from a prison you don't even know you're in. And those who know must teach. We are victims of a system in place for maintaining white dominance and to protect the white society from massive unified black retribution. Brothers and sisters, it's time to wake up to our reality. One love and peace.